afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Simon Thomsen. I'm the editor of Startup Daily and the host of the Startup Daily show on AusBiz every afternoon from 2 p.m. Do tune in because I think you'll have a great time. Well, it's great to have your company today. Bujari Gamaru, I'd like to welcome you from the Gadigal lands here in Sydney. And I do want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land upon which we all gather today. When the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, I pay my respects to our leaders, past, present and emerging, and Torres Strait and Islander people everywhere, wherever you're joining us today. Well, we have a cracker of a webinar for you. It's called The Great Retain, How to Keep the Best Talent Right Now, made possible by Startup Daily and our sponsor, HiBob. For those of you who have yet to discover it, HiBob is a modern HR platform that powers productivity, engagement and retention for businesses around the globe, and here in Australia for businesses such as Airtasker, Sear, Pexa and Novarti. You may have heard of them. Thanks for helping us bring today's webinar to life. Now, I interview people from all facets of the startup landscape every day: founders, CFOs, CEOs, VCs, people and culture experts. And there is one theme that comes up over and over again: talent. You hear about the talent shortage, the great resignation, the great reshuffle. People have reprioritised what they want out of work. It's left a lot of businesses scrambling to retain their most valuable asset, their people. Meanwhile, employee engagement has become just that bit more challenging, with teams here, there and everywhere in our new hybrid workforces. And with clouds forming over the current market, you've got a perfect storm that could rain all over many people's parades. Well, we're optimists here, so we love a challenge, and we're here today to find out how and what perspectives and strategies are great for keeping really good people with some of the best in your team. We have an award-winning Aussie unicorn, a rising fintech star and an HR expert with us. For the next hour, we'll dig into company culture, blind spots in keeping tech talent, and what incentives and initiatives are building loyalty. Plenty to talk about. Well, let's meet our fantastic panel because they are incredibly talented. Anna Wenngren is the Chief People Officer at SafetyCulture, a global technology company helping working teams get better every day. From humble beginnings in a garage in Townsville, Queensland, it now has a valuation of $2.2 billion Australian, and SafetyCulture is attracting worldwide attention. Since Anna joined in March 2020, SafetyCulture has gone on to achieve Best Place to Work recognition across 4 continents. It's also grown from 300 to 550 people in that time. That, of course, is a challenge in itself. Anna has more than 2 decades of experience in human resources and is passionate about the psychology of human beings and how we respond to an ever-changing world. Anna, great to have you join us today from that fantastic SafetyCulture bunker here in Surrey Hills in Sydney. It's such an amazing site that it's one of those places where I think everyone just loves to go to work, because as I walk past it, I do feel a little bit envious. Great to have you join us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Damien Andreasen is the country manager of HiBob for Australia and New Zealand. For more than a decade, Damien has founded and held C-suite positions for several Australian tech companies in the B2B and HR space, including Lawpath, Spreets and Ento. Damien recently joined HiBob, one of the world's fastest growing HR tech companies that was built for the way people work today, globally, remotely, and of course, collaboratively. Damien is focused on leading and driving its business expansion across the Asia Pacific region. So we've got plenty to talk about with him. Damien, great to have you join us as well. Thanks for coming along to today's webinar.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, Lucy Chisholm is the HR lead of the Australian financial services and payments technology business Zeller. Lucy is an experienced culture champion. She has more than a decade of experience in HR specialties, including talent management, the development and implementation of HR strategies, internal communications and change management, all critical aspects of building a great culture. Zeller's team has grown by more than 100 employees in the last 12 months, making Lucy's role of developing a strong culture and fostering innovation more important than ever. Lucy, thanks for joining us as well. Great to have your company and insights.
Thanks, Simon. It's nice to be here.
Now, for those of you watching, you can drop your questions in the chat box as we go. We'll make a little time for questions later on. You can be anonymous, or why not tell us your name and your business if you feel like giving yourself a free plug along the way as well. Well, gang, let's get into it. There is a lot to think about. There are some very big issues across the board, and I'm going to start with one of the big questions. How do you build and adapt your company culture with a competitive edge? The blind spots in finding and keeping great tech talent. So I want to ask you all, and that question, what are the big issues that you're seeing right now beginning to emerge? Damien, let's kick off with you.
Sure. I think there's the obvious piece that we were all talking about earlier and everyone's very aware of is just market conditions. Those that have funding and those that might be in a position where they need to rethink their budgets and their headcount. That's got to be one of the biggest concerns for any business and any employee at the moment is the stability of their role in their company. And I think, we'll see a bit of a divide as we move forward between those who might have, recently raised rounds and those who may not have recently raised rounds and what the impact is to those two businesses. And that's got to be, I think, very front and center for a lot of people. And even companies who have raised rounds recently are adjusting their strategy, and it's no longer a go for growth at all costs type mentality. And that means everyone's sitting back, reprioritizing, understanding what roles are going to have the true impact that they need with a new strategy moving forward. I think the other big thing is no one really knows where the market is right now, except for maybe the word is curious. Maybe we're all waiting for the second shoe to drop, but there feels to be a bit of a pause and a big a holding of breath until we understand where it's all going. And companies at the moment are really, doubling down at looking at their strategy and are they on the right path?
Anna, I want to do a temperature check with you too. Of course, we went through this great resignation thing and it's suddenly like, do I get to keep my job at this point in time? There is a nervousness in the market that's gone from 20-year-old graduates getting $200,000 a year to perhaps being the first people cut at the moment. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, it's sad when you see people leave an organisation like ours, and they go for what they think is a great opportunity in an uptick in base salary, which is very short-lived, and then not long after we're seeing those people unfortunately posting that they've lost their jobs or been made redundant or approaching us to see whether they can come back. So the market definitely has shifted. We were just having a little conversation as a panelists beforehand around how much extra work we're having to do in recruiting people at the moment, where the cash flow runway is a big topic of question that comes up, and so people want to know much more about job security and the future of the business. And people are doing a lot more research before changing jobs at the moment. Absolutely.
Lucy, are you noting that due diligence by potential employees along the way as well? What's your feeling?
We're definitely adding in extra steps for some of our interview processes because people do have questions. We have been really transparent with our existing team, and I suppose anyone coming in, they can see we are full steam ahead, but we're also really cognizant there are pressures in the market and we're talking to people about them.
So I want to ask the three of you, what's the one thing standing in the way of businesses retaining great talent right now? Lucy, while you've got you on screen, let's go with you.
Sure. So I suppose for us, further to that last point, we are finding as long as we continue to consult with our teams, we're seeing strong engagement. I think we're leaders, if they fail to consult or bring people into the decision-making process, that could potentially lead to maybe some attrition or risk to retention and engagement.
And what about for you, Anna?
Yeah, I think our attitude to this is that we win with culture. So you might be able to attract people with great big fat salaries, but when times get tough, they're not the people that are going to stick behind the business and help you get through those more difficult times. So we've doubled down in these last few years on our culture, and we focused. I mean, we've just in May returned from having the whole business off in Hawaii at an event where it was all around thinking about the future of the business, connecting them to our customers, our organisation's purpose, because we really do believe that if people are connected to a greater sense of just themselves and the work that they're doing is creating to the business and making the world a better place, then that is really fulfilling. And we know that those that achieve really meaningful goals at work, people that enjoy what they do, and there are moments of celebration along the way, those that get the opportunity to develop and grow themselves within their work, and those that have great partnerships. We try really hard to remove the hierarchy from our relationships as much as we can at work, because we know that top performance is a team effort, and it's about great partnerships between employees and their people leaders. And if we can create an environment where that is occurring, then that creates a stickiness with our people where we become a place that they actually want to work.
Damien, of course, you see this not just here in Asia Pacific, but for HiBob globally. What's your perspective in terms of any impediments?
Yeah, look, I think one of the things that a lot of people who are trying to maybe overcome or improve engagement and retention rates is starting with awareness and insights. I think a lot of the time it's really difficult to solve something that you can't measure or see. And so obviously coming from a background where we're talking about tooling, I always think tooling and process need to go hand in hand. You need to be able to have the right processes internally to engage the staff and give them a safe place to give feedback, but then also a tool that aggregates the information, gives you insights by maybe region, department, role type, because engagement is different across different areas and different roles within the business, right? It's a nuance. It does start top down. Leadership and the vision and the mission of a company and also its values are very important here. But if you don't have a tool that can't bring you real granularity of insights, it's very difficult to measure what you need to lean into and what are some of the issues that some people may be facing. And sometimes it's not comfortable for people to have those conversations in one-to-ones directly with their managers, right? Because there's a fear factor that's involved. So how do you remove that and give people a safe space to actually be able to provide feedback? And then, a lot of the tooling and what you want to see is the granularity, but trends over time as well. You might find that there's a particular manager or a department that's got an issue, and therefore, you need to lean into that particular area as opposed to try and solve across the business. So there's definitely angles of granularity. And, again, the big thing that I think a lot of people start with is how do we get the information to then take action?
Now, Anna, I'm going to call you highly experienced rather than a veteran of HR, but I do want to ask you, what have you seen change over the last 20 years? My sense is, especially with the younger generations coming through, is that there's a much more greater focus on values in a business than the initial transactional thing we used to have around salary, where I gave you my body and brain for X number of hours each week and you gave me this much money. It's all about the purpose of being in the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's call me a veteran. So I think that when I started in HR, the focus was really around on HR teams was about process, procedures, control. It was all about collecting lots of employee information, and HR were very much seen as an arm of the business and management. Whereas when you've got millennials and Gen Zs joining organisations now, they've really changed what they expect from the relationship with, and we've seen that. I love working in tech and startups because we're so much more progressive in our people policies. So, long gone are the days of human resources departments, and we're all focused on people and culture, and there's a much greater demand on the workplace experience. So what sort of space are you going to create for me, and how are we going to, what's the environment, what sort of values are really important in how we go about doing our work at the organisation I'm working at. So I think that the focus on really partnership over policing has been the biggest shift that I've seen in the last 20 years.
And I think even that name shift from HR, which makes it sound like a business input, to the fact that you are building a culture, is one of those things. Lucy, you've got the task and opportunity, I think, along the way of building a culture in a young, growing tech business. How have you approached that at Zeller, especially taking 100 people on board? You kind of go from that moment where you know everyone in the team to going, really, do they work here too?
So we, funnily enough, Simon, we were founded just as COVID took off. So we actually pretty much we did start working remotely. So our culture has actually grown quite organically over that time. We have a vibe tribe, which is made up of quite a diverse group of our employees. So we come together and we have fun and often impactful activities, which we found have been quite successful. We do our best. We try and tie them into certain events, activities, days in the market, or cultural holidays as well. So we are looking outside of Australia to make sure we're capturing our global team. We actually have a brand new office in Melbourne, and just this week we've also opened an office in Sydney. So what we're actually finding is our culture is shifting again, and people are really wanting to come in. So we are emphasising at the moment, because we've got these fantastic new spaces, some of our in-office events. We do have virtual events, but we're really driving engagement and seeing that culture shift because people are wanting to come back in.
Lucy, while I've got you, I do want to ask, given your experience at that cutting edge of building a new startup, what mistakes do startup founders make in scaling their business quickly?
One thing that I think we probably are all guilty of is actually trying to do too many things at once. So my recommendation would certainly be to play to your strengths. I think if you're in a position to do so, I would definitely recommend hiring people to do the things that you can't, or to focus on the areas that probably don't need your time. I also recommend, and I've mentioned it earlier, just let things grow organically. I think we are all at risk, and we're very aware that there are times where policies or processes can actually hinder progress. That's something we've found here at Zeller as we've grown so quickly. So I think for us personally, we've known when's the right time to introduce a policy or a process. And I think you should always listen to your gut or go with your instincts and introduce them when the time's right.
That is very good advice. Damien, of course, you've been a founder yourself, had that experience in a range of startups. So I'm intrigued, what led you down the path to joining HiBob?
Yeah, look, I've been, a founder and also joining early stage companies at different kind of segments of their growth phase. Something that I just hadn't been a part of is like a truly global, multi-billion-dollar company that was on an unbelievable growth trajectory. And it was the experience of actually joining that and just understanding what the delta was between, what's it like in an early stage startup when you're jack of all trades, you're still trying to find your path, you're still trying to put in early stage processes, versus maybe later stage, and the realities of what that is like. And, for me as well, the HR tech space is a wonderful place to work. It's, for me, sits in that must-have category rather than a nice-to-have in terms of, the problems that it's solving. And I think you get to work with some really interesting people. You get great insights into how businesses are operating, how they think about their people and leadership teams, their strategies. So for me, it was just an opportunity to experience the other side of the fence and, work with a brilliant product.
Now, Damien, I do want to ask, Lucy was referring to it earlier, building Zeller, but mostly remotely over the last couple of years. And we've had this ongoing debate around sort of, whether people are taking their laptops to the loo during Zoom meetings and everything else. But the serendipity, that sort of gathering in the kitchen, maybe while you microwave your lunch and having this random chat with someone that you don't otherwise know, It's a really interesting thing that I think everyone is still grappling with. So I'm really interested in knowing, how does HiBob sort of tackle those issues using tech?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways that we do it. And we kind of got a saying here, we drink our own Merlot, and, we're a fast growing tech company. And when I joined about 12 months ago, we were 300 people. We're now 650 globally, and we continue just to grow. Like, the rate of change here has been insane. And so we use Bob, obviously, and it's a great place. I was onboarded remotely. 80% of my team that I built here were onboarded remotely, and we use Bob as a central place to come together. It's a place for recognition, milestones, and I think recognition, when done in isolation, maybe on an email to someone who's done a great job, is wonderful that they're being recognized. When you do it at a global level, everyone can see the impact that individual is happening, can share in the excitement, the celebration of what they've achieved. It pulls people together. It gives them a sense of connectivity to the organization. And, you got to be really clear with how do you send out your global messaging, and how do you reiterate your values and your mission statements, and how we're working towards those things on a regular basis. So a big part of it is communication and recognition and discovering and discussing milestones. And I think a lot of that, when you have it remotely, it's actually harder work to keep people connected to the actual mission and feel engaged, right? You need to actually invest a lot more time. And one of the things that we're doing outside of the use of using Bob here and tooling to kind of promote that is to actually put some of the control back into the hands of the employees who want to feel engaged. And so we've done stuff here, and it sounds very similar to maybe what Lucy's doing, which is a self-organizing social committee which takes control of what we do as an organization, how we come together, and what outside of work or even work initiatives we are doing to kind of feel like we're a connected team. And I think part of that is, it gives them the ownership of creating the culture that they want to be involved with. And I think that's been a really strong part of what we've done here as well. And it takes some of the onus of the managers to consistently be feeling like they have to create, this ongoing kind of initiatives and environments, because it's very difficult to do. It's a lot of energy. So giving it back to some of the employees to self-drive has worked really well for us.
I have to say the jury's still out for me on the ability to walk from my home office to the fridge and stare in and grab something versus the number of cakes with all the birthdays here at Pinstripe at the moment. I'm not sure where the calories are going at this point in time, but I do want to focus a little bit on the talk around talent, churn and burn, which we've been having at the moment. It is an interesting inflection point, I think, in Australian and New Zealand tech. What are the common blind spots, I want to ask all of you, for founders and their people leaders, the people and culture leaders, which they need to look at when finding and keeping great tech talent? What are those things that they really need to focus on first and foremost? Lucy, let's start with you.
Sure. I suppose one thing that comes to mind is perhaps only hiring for skill set. I know, there's a lot of pressures on the market at the moment, so we really have to pivot our thinking in hiring and how we bring people in. So I suppose for us at Zeller, we've had great success when we hire for, say, 80% of the skill set. And then we really dig deep in, what's their attitude like? Do they have an awesome attitude and a growth mindset? Are they enthusiastic about our, what we're looking to build and so on? And then from there, if we think they tick all those boxes and they do go through a rigorous process through that, also for them to vet Zeller as much as we're getting to know them. And so, we can then work with them when they come on board and fill any gaps.
And what's your take, Anna?
I think startups aren't always for everyone, and so when you get to a certain size and stage, you need to bring more experience into your business, and the temptation can be there to really go after a candidate that you've fallen in love with, that you think would bring great value to your organisation. And for us, the mistake that we made along the way, and that I would say to everyone to be a watch out, is just not to oversell, where your business is at, because it's very exciting, but at the same time, startups and scale ups, we're not perfect. We're messy in parts. There's things that we're not good at. And so the more that you can be transparent with talent about what's actually going on in the organisation before they've joined, it really lets them come in with eyes wide open about problems to solve. And that's what you need at that size of the organisation. You need people coming in that are ready to solve really meaty, chunky problems, because often it's things that have never been done before. And then when it comes to retaining people in the organisation, for us it's really about thinking, does the walk match the talk? Because I know I've got friends that have worked in banking, for example, where they'll have great flexibility policies that exist, but everyone on the floor knows that if you tried to access any of those policies, that, to be career limiting. So it's really important, if you're going to retain great people, then all of the things that you profess to be as a business and the values you put on your wall, you've really got to live and breathe all of those things and make sure that there's a felt experience of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. That walking the talk thing, I think, is essential, because we often see that disconnect. Anna, while I've got you, one of the questions that's already come in, and it's from Michelle Aguilar from a fantastic female-founded engineering business called Vapor, which I absolutely love. She asked, based on Anna's thoughts on partnership versus policing, how do you change team mindset from thinking of feedback as a quote, workplace experience improver rather than a quote, management task?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it takes an investment. So we had to invest in sessions with all of our people and all of our people leaders to make sure that that feedback flows two ways. And I think often it's a lot harder to give feedback to your boss than what it would be to a peer or even a subordinate. And so we really did a lot of work in getting people to, rather than try and avoid or get to a point where they felt confident giving feedback, feedback, difficult feedback, because that's never going to happen, let's face it. So rather than sit there and think, okay, well, I'm not confident doing it, can I acknowledge my discomfort and lean into it anyway, because that's the way that this person is if they're my boss, this is the way that I'm going to get a better partnership with them, and that I'm going to perform better if I can provide this feedback to them. And likewise, we want it flowing across departments. So we want this, across engineering and product and sales and go-to-market and people talking to customers and bringing that information back. So we want the feedback flowing all ways around the business, and we really try hard to lead by example. So our CEO and founder leans into this so that whenever he does a presentation with our people, he asks the question of someone in the audience, how did I go? Rate me out of 10. What would have made it better in your eyes? And he does it really publicly so that we build that muscle around, hey, we're not perfect, and our skill set and the things that we're able to do are not a reflection of our self-worth.
Yeah, I do think Luke sets an amazing example on that front. Now, before we move on to our next section, Damien, I do just want to ask you as well about that blind spot idea, and also pick up on something else that I think Anna's touched on. Is there such a thing as over communication with your team? Can you sort of talk to them too much about what's going on and what you're doing and where you are?
I don't know about over communication. I think it's context and value. I think a lot of the time what I'm seeing really good leaders transform the way they're talking to their peers and their team about is, leading with context as to why are we asking you to make this change, and what's the impact to you, and why will it, how's it going to change the day-to-day for you, or, benefit what you're doing here. And I think really good leaders lead with context and clear communication as to why. So in my opinion, it's not so much an issue of over communication, so long as it's high quality. But yeah, look, if you've got someone who's consistently just blasting out information and not really understanding the impact of it, then you could have that issue. Yeah.
And any blind spots that you think founders need to be aware of?
In terms of attracting and retaining?
Yeah.
Look, I think it's just interesting. I think attracting and retaining, there's no silver bullet to it. There's a lot that comes into this. There's a lot of tactical pieces that you need to be kind of aware of. But the big thing is just investing the time in listening. I think that's the key that I've seen as probably the most successful. And not just listening, but, showing the team that you're taking action against some of the top priorities. You can't solve everything all at once. You need to be able to prioritize what's the most important at what points. And, if you're actively listening and taking action, then I think a lot of really smart people realize that your intention is to continuously improve. So listening without action is one issue that does occur. So you need to be careful that you are actually taking into consideration what's being said and publicly showing that, it's being addressed.
That is great advice indeed. Well, if you're just joining us, you're watching The Great Retain, how to keep your best talent right now. Don't forget, if you've got any questions coming up soon, drop them in our chat box. Tell us your talent problems and we'll try our best to try and solve them for you. Let's get back to our next section now with our fantastic panel, Anna, Lucy and Damien. Best practice for employee engagement with hybrid teams. One we're all, I think, feeling our way on a little bit, but also the role of salary, leave, flexible working incentives and other benefits. Damien, I'm going to come back to you again. For the past 2 years, we've seen a monumental shift in people wanting out of work from the businesses you work with. What concerns seem to be coming up with the new hybrid ways of working? I think trust has been one of those ones first up for managers in terms of, are we doing the job or are we skiving off at home? But there must be other things that are keeping people up at night. What are you seeing?
Yeah, look, again, I think it's being connected to the mission, the outcomes, and ensuring that people are still achieving the goals they have and feeling supported in the role as well. Being isolated at home can lead to some, we've known there's been a lot of talk about mental health issues that are coming up, right? How are we helping to address that with people who are feeling isolated, who are working from home? Are we still giving them a space that they can come in and share time with teams? Are we actively giving them budget to maybe fly, interstate to come and work with the teams on a quarterly basis? I really think there's a range of stuff that we can do here. But I think work-life balance is here, and I think we need to find a path that does both. Gives you an opportunity to come into the team, do work, but also when you need to get on with the work at home. And I know for myself, and it arranges with different roles. I've got very different types of work I do. I do work with my team where I like to be in person and sit down with them and connect bonds and have face-to-face conversations. I've also got initiative and project-based work where I like to stare at my screen and not be tapped on the shoulder every 5 minutes. And that's the beauty of what this hybrid world has, or the new world of work and remote work has provided us, is the ability to kind of divide what types of tasks we're doing in what kind of environments. And I actually think that leads to a huge amount of productivity. I think anyone who's still dealing with trust issues around productivity it probably needs to fast forward their thinking, because it's really easy to understand if the output is there, and that's ultimately what we should be measuring success on.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the tangible solutions, and I think you touched on some of these a little bit earlier, that make teams feel more connected when there is that danger that they may be starting to become disengaged?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that you need to do. You need to give them a path to be able to communicate, to be recognised, to celebrate milestones and achievements, a way for the employees to talk to the company to talk to the employees, no matter where they are, in an open forum. Some people use Slack as a great engagement tool. Actually, a lot of companies use this. There's more sophisticated stuff like within your HRISs that you can use as well. But that free flow of communication, I think, is one key component. I also actually think it's really important to bring teams together on a semi-regular basis as well. So, one of the things that we do here is quarterly retrospectives. We sit down and we look at all the performance of the business from the previous quarter. We're very open about what's trending well and what we need to address moving forward. We realign on the vision and the strategy, make sure that we're all bought in, and then we all go have a jolly together and make sure that we make some memories as well, right? Like, you've got to be able to balance these two things, and that's ultimately culture and engagement. And I think we're seeing more and more of the blend between the personal and the professional life, and especially for the younger generations coming up through the ranks, they want the wall between what I do at work and kind of what I do in my personal life. It's being pulled back a bit, right? Like, we're talking more about bringing authentic self to work, and if that's the case and that's what we want, then there is going to be the blend between professional and personal. So supporting those two aspects and making sure that everyone has real connections, I think, is a real key.
I think that's a great point, Damien. I don't think anyone's going to look back on their career 20 years later and say, remember that really great Microsoft Teams meeting we all had together. Creating memories is such an important part of it. Anna and Lucy, tell us, you are on the front line. What is staff telling you about their employee experience and that hybrid model, and what is and isn't working? Lucy?
I suppose for us, at the height of the COVID lockdowns and isolation, or working in isolation, people did tell us they were getting a bit tired of the virtual catch-ups and social engagement. So for us, we pivoted and made everything optional. We, as I mentioned, we have moved into the office in Sydney this week. We've got a brand new office in Melbourne. So we have been very considered. We are asking people if they'd like to come in. We'd love to see them. We do have a lot of fun when they come in, and people are happy to come in. We're finding, as long as they still have that flexibility and can balance it with working from home. So I guess for Zeller, as I mentioned, we're pretty excited to see what we can achieve in person, given what we've achieved working remotely. And we'll just continue to listen to our team. We'll ask them for feedback. To Damien's point as well, like work-life blend, it's very much a thing. So we'll continue to iterate and speak with our teams and take their feedback on board.
Anna, I think SafetyCulture is one of those businesses that the rest of the ANZ startup and tech community looks to for guidance in terms of the way forward tackling this particular issue. What's happening in your conversations with the teams?
Yeah, well, to your point, I don't think anybody has actually cracked the solution, and that what we found is that, it's not a one size fits all, and that people want different types of flexibility. We've got some employees that live in regional Australia who fly in for a week and then spend the rest of the 3 weeks working remotely. We've got people that like to come into the office, maybe once or twice a week, where they're actually spending time with their colleagues. I think, to Lucy's point, we are social creatures, and many of us missed the camaraderie that came with being physically together in an office, and we spent a lot of money on building an amazing workspace. And our philosophy around that has been, if anyone's old enough to remember that Kevin Costner Field of Dreams movie, if you build it, they will come. We wanted to create a space that people actually wanted to be in, that inspired creativity, that meant that people wanted to get up in the morning and come to work and see their friends. And so that's really, we've left it to the teams to work out what hybrid means for them and what they know what they need to accomplish. So we've left it to them to, well, you decide for yourselves and for your own team what works in terms of getting that work done. But our only ask of you all has been, don't get rigid about flexibility. Because when you get rigid about, I mean, it's a crazy irony, but when you've got someone saying, oh, well, Fridays is my work from home day, so I can't come in and do that customer meeting, well, that's when your business starts to suffer. So we've really just drilled into them that rigidity and flexibility, that, you know, they're polar opposites, and we need to make sure that if you want the flexibility to live the life that you want to have outside of work, then we need flexibility in terms of making sure our customers' needs are met.
I've just written that down and we'll be printing it up to put on the wall. Don't get rigid about your flexibility. I think that is such fantastic advice. And of course, if you are in a startup, you need to be able to pivot. You need to be nimble. You need to change all the time. So we can be creatures of habit, human beings, I know, but constantly moving out of our comfort zones, I think, is such an important part of that. Now, Anna, while I have you, of course, we've gone through the bean bags, we've gone through the ping pong tables, we've gone through the bars, all of these bits and pieces over the years of what constituted, you know, the perks of being part of a startup or a hip workplace. SafetyCulture has taken a very clear position in terms of training and other benefits for employees, whether it's things like paternal leave or other family issues that people have to tackle along the way, and being generous around those. I do want to ask you, what has resonated strongly with the employees and new starters that you really think, wow, why didn't we do this sooner?
Yeah, well, I'm going to lift on the point that Damien made earlier about that blend between work life and home life, and how that has just blurred so much. And we used to come to work and we had our work facade, and we didn't talk about things that were going on in our personal life because we felt that would be limiting from a professional perspective. And so we compartmentalized everything. And I think one of the shifts that we've really tried to make as an organisation is that life is messy. We will all go through things like grief and loss, and, you know, it shows up in all different types of ways. Separation from partners, you know, kids being bullied at school. There's real heartache that all of us will experience as human beings. So our philosophy on this has been, how can we lean in to make all of those messy conversations more normal? How can we lead with vulnerability? And we've created policies here that I hope that the majority of our staff never have to access, but that they're there in case they need to. So they're things like support for domestic violence, domestic and family violence. We were doing that long before this became, you know, a topic of, you know, in politics, where they started to think about what we needed to introduce. We had a policy in place for people that found themselves in those circumstances. We were leading the way in the introduction of miscarriage leave for couples that found themselves in those circumstances. So we really want to normalise the hard stuff so that people know that you can show up however some people are having a good day, some people are having a bad day, and just life is messy. So let's embrace the messiness together. And that really does create a sense of team and support.
Yeah, I do think along the way we all know what pets we have, what they look like and how they behave during online meetings. But to your point around miscarriage, and this is a personal story which I've shared publicly previously, but when we went through a miscarriage, the experience of my wife in finally telling her work colleagues what had happened absolutely unlocked something which was secret up until that point in time. So I think setting those sorts of policies and giving people those opportunities to share things like grief along the way are such an important part of that experience in that work-life balance. Lucy, to what we've been talking about, what's been working at Zeller? What are those moments where you're just patting yourself on the back and saying, we've nailed this?
This is certainly one that's not just me patting myself, but I know for our team, and it's not so much an incentive or a program, but the motivation that our team feels because we're building a bank is pretty unbelievable. So pretty much all of us, that's a once in a lifetime opportunity. So that in itself is very exciting. I think where people are also excited and motivated is that we're still at that stage where we can see that everything we're doing has a measurable impact. So the influences, the things that we're doing now will influence what Zeller actually looks like in the future. I suppose to bring it back to incentives and so on, learning and development is something that's very much top of mind in workplaces at the moment. We kind of turned that on its head a little bit. So we do have some internal programs, but we've actually recently, or in the last 12 months or so, introduced an allowance for our team to put towards something that's actually of interest for them, for their professional development, so they can get really excited and choose something that they'd like to learn more about. So be it copywriting, learning to code, it might be honing your soft skills, etc. It's between the leader and their team member to actually have a conversation. The team member says, this is what I'd like to explore a little bit more or learn more about, and then the leader and myself will come in and support them where we need to.
Now, Leslie, while I have you, we do have another question. This goes back to our earlier conversation, and it's Jen from Preactor Recruitment. She's really interested in your point about policy and procedures potentially hindering progress and knowing the right time to introduce them. Can you elaborate on this and the potential signs when the time is right to take action?
Sure. So I suppose for all workplaces, you definitely have guardrails and guidelines in place. We need to ensure the safety and the well-being of our team. But again, it comes back, talk to the team, provide feedback, seek feedback, consult with people. I'm trying to think of a policy that we've introduced. There are a few, and there are some others that we've actually paused on introducing because we're covered under the National Employment Standards, most of us, so there are things that will cover us in some ways. But you will know, and as I said, seek feedback, talk to the team, do read up, see what's happening in the market as well, and if it feels like it's the right time for you, you'll know.
Good advice there, and I think, as you said a little bit earlier too, trust your gut on that front along the way as well. We're coming to the final section of The Great Retain, how to keep your best talent right now. Chance to pop in any questions in the chat box if you are interested. We're now going to turn our attention for our final section to mental health, wellness, diversity and inclusion initiatives and the challenges of the current market downturn. Damien, I do want to start with you. Of course, mental health, especially during the pandemic, has really come to the fore, which is a great thing. And again, going back to that idea of having open conversations, we are being a lot more vulnerable. People are hopefully less afraid of identifying it in front of their employers and not seeing it as a sign of weakness. But how does a business itself and those in charge prove that they're positively contributing to a start of mental health, especially when you are in a startup and you've got to move fast, you've got to push hard, it can be challenging, it can be stressful, there are a whole bunch of pressures that, can have an impact.
Yeah, I think one of the first things, and I think I touched on this earlier, is you have to be empathetic and you have to allow people to work. If you're creating an environment that's a trusted one with your employees and your team, they're more likely to come to you with issues and be open and honest about them, right? And I think that's the first step, is if you can't create a trusted environment where people can trust that they can be open about the challenges that they're having and the support that they need, we're missing the fundamental step. There's a lot of things that you can put in place, and I think really the simplest thing that I've ever seen work is just acting as a human and being understanding of what someone's going through and saying to them, if you need time, it's okay. The stuff that you're doing, regardless of if it's mission critical or if it's not, can be covered in one way or another, but we can't cover you and replace you, right? So I think leading with that, just that human empathy, and that's probably the biggest key that you can do, and having very open, transparent conversations, I think, with the team at large. And I think every manager and every HR team knows when organizations, especially startups, go through phases of increased stress. And it's a roller coaster. There will always be crunch points in any growing business that's trying to do amazing things with limited resources, where the feeling of the organization is like we're stretched. And if you're keeping an ear out for that and actively looking for it when it does happen, and you're addressing it and doing it in a way that's transparent and open, and people can come and have trusted conversations with you, and then you respond to that with empathy, and not just, hey, you've only got 2 sick days left. Like, that's not the way to deal with this, right? It has to be done from a human perspective, and I think really good bosses and really good organizations do this well.
Yeah, and I do think your ROI comes back regardless of how many days or days off you don't have. But I'm going to turn my attention to you, Anna and Lucy. Do you feel that there's more pressure on people and culture leaders now when it comes to being involved in that mental health area? And also, how do you ensure that the programs are meaningful and just resonating with your employees so that they do have that confidence to address any things that they're feeling? Anna, let's kick off with you.
All right. Well, I think that I don't think there's any more pressure, but I do think there's more intentionality around mental health. And I spent many years actually volunteering with Lifeline, so as a crisis counsellor, and I've brought so much of what I learned during that experience to our leaders in the organisation here around the simple act of just being and listening. So Damien was talking about that empathy. As leaders, we're wired to problem solve. And so what we found during this period is as people brought up issues that they were experiencing from home, or what our leaders just wanted to fix everything, and it can actually just start to make the person feel worse. So it is so empowering just to have someone who's prepared to sit and listen to you and be with you in your moment. And then what you'll find is I really do believe that people are the experts in their own lives. And if you gift me with the space to be able to talk it out, then I will often find a solution to my own problem. And so a key for us has really been educating our leaders. It's almost the easiest thing ever of just take the pressure off yourself from needing to fix the thing that's come up for the individual, and just spend some quality time being with them and listening to them and empathizing with them. And you'll be surprised at what they're able to resolve for themselves in those moments.
I remember that from learning that lesson up in Byron Bay in the 90s when I was up there, and they used to call it a debrief. We'd all sit around and have a debrief, and after that you often answered your own question and could get on with things. So I think that is excellent advice. Lucy, what about for you?
I think there is a little bit more pressure actually, but one of the whether it's beautiful things about remote working and isolation is that leaders, we have gone into people's lives, and to Damien's point, there's only work-life blend now rather than that balance that we once knew perhaps. And, our leaders are more attuned to the needs of our teams. So what we've found is that, as long as our teams have the tools, or our leaders have the tools and our teams know how to access them, we'll keep the conversations open and make sure they've got everything they need to look after their teams, I suppose.
All right, well, I do want to turn my attention now to diversity and inclusion. And of course, along the way, we've addressed the issue of the balance between men and women, but this issue is much, much broader than that. And I also think it is now front of mind in many people, especially younger generations, as they look around the room. It's a key not just to retaining talent, but also to productivity and the success of a business, especially solving big problems more broadly. So I want to ask the three of you, what are the meaningful things that founders and startups can do to move the needle here? Damien, let's kick it off with you.
Look, DE&I is a pretty broad topic, and it can be applied to many aspects of a business. And I think, you can go from the analysis of equity, is there fair equity across, different roles, different demographics? It's not just male and female. It goes well beyond male and female, right? I think inclusion is also a big component of this, and it's a big part of what we try and focus on locally, which is, even the example that I gave of like creating a social committee and giving them an opportunity to control some of their environment and have input and impact into how they shape their environment, their world, and their enjoyment of what they do. So it's a hugely broad topic, DE&I, and I think it's like it can be boiled down to male-female, which I know is the most prominent component of what we talk about, and a piece that still needs to be addressed. But we need to think more broadly than this as well. equity inclusion are just as important. So yeah, look, there's no silver bullet here. I think one of the things, coming back to part of what I experienced working for a company like HiBob with some of the tools we have here is firstly, understanding what is the makeup of the business. Who are you as an organization, not just as tenure, title, and salary, but the background of you as a human being, bringing that to the forefront as well, right? And once you understand your organization and who it is made up of in terms of your team and the many different aspects of what that kind of combines, you have a better way of being able to plan around it and take action. I think that is going to have real and meaningful impact. So for me, it's a very expansive conversation. You've got to start with the data first, and you've got to have an open conversation with your people as always.
Anna, for SafetyCulture, of course, they are dealing with an incredibly diverse workforce, the customers who are on construction sites and a range of other industries. So it's really important, I think, that inside the business you reflect that in terms of solving problems, because I do see the story over and over again in startups where someone builds a product, but let's say that sort of 6-foot blokes design it and forget that a whole bunch of 5'4" women are going to be using it, and the dimensions are just wrong across the board. It's a basic example, but you see those sorts of things happen over and over again. How does SafetyCulture and how do you think about the issue of diversity and building it into the business as just a state of mind, almost so you don't have to talk about it, it just happens?
Yeah, I mean, you're right in the evolution of our company. So we had so many high-vis type customers that were working on heavy industry sites and in construction, and we've evolved so much to our operations platform now, where we're being used by, it could be, airlines or retail or all different types, all walks and talks. So for us, that diversity of our workforce to reflect our customers is really important. And so we do so many of the things that Damien sort of talked about there, and looking particularly at gender in STEM. We want to make sure that we are hiring, balance of people that are coming into the organisation at more junior levels, so that we've got more to select from at more senior levels as they're promoted through the business. We invest heavily in things like busting bias, so that people can actually understand, well, we all have biases, and it's not wrong to have them. It's all about being aware of them. And then when we get people that join our organisation, in their first month, they actually go through a psychological profiling tool, which then allows us to have workshops where we get to examine the diversity of people's personalities and the way in which we think and the way in which we problem solve. And so we really learn to celebrate difference rather than fear it, and we learn how to work with each other more effectively in that space, so that everyone walks away with tips and hacks for difficult personalities that they might be engaging with, or conversations that they might need to have, or styles of operating. So we try and tackle it on so many different levels, from whether it's gender, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's the way in which we think. And if we can educate our people constantly about this and celebrate our difference, then we feel that that's a really winning formula.
And Lucy, what about for you? I mean, it's not just about building a Noah's Ark of two of every type of person on the planet. What does it mean for Zeller as you build out your banking system with a diverse group of people from all walks of life, and even things like neurodiversity, which is such an important part of who we are as a community as well?
Yeah, so I suppose for us, right back to the recruitment process at the very get-go, once upon a time it was always about, how do they fit into our culture? We very much focus on culture add. So I suppose that's helped to diversify our team as well. Just changing that mindset, and we've really pivoted on some of the questions that we've asked people, or asked candidates, excuse me. I suppose for us also, again, I know I've mentioned it a number of times, feedback. What does the team want? Splitting into specific teams, providing multiple channels for feedback. As an example, some people don't necessarily feel comfortable speaking up, so making sure they have the means and the ways to actually get their feedback or opinions across as well. I suppose if I was to drill into one example, we have really strong engagement amongst our working parents. I am sure there are a lot of parents on this call right now who can relate. During COVID, you had days that definitely didn't pan out how you planned because of your kids. And I suppose, diversity, inclusion, and belonging is very important. I, as an example, knew I was joining a fantastic company because even before I'd gotten to my office stage, I was interviewing remotely with our founder and CEO, Ben. He'd met my son more than once. So I was like, this is the right company for me. So again, coming back, humanising the process as best we can, asking tough questions if we need to, opening up the floor to candidates, keeping the conversations going internally, and actually actioning any feedback.
Yeah, really good stuff there. I do want to finish with this one. We're coming up to the end of our session, but it of course is the big one and it's front of everyone's mind at the moment. We are seeing startups shutting down. There is a nervousness creeping in and everyone is wondering what's next. We started talking a little bit earlier about the question that potential candidates are asking about runway in startups. So tell us, what's your advice in terms of keeping company culture positive when there is change or choppy waters ahead? Anna, let's kick that one off with you.
So we're acutely conscious of the fact, and we learnt this during COVID, that when there are things happening in an external environment that are outside of our control, then you get a heightened level of anxiety amongst your workforce. And so the first thing that we have done is to acknowledge that and share that we're aware of that with all of our people. And then we've just increased the transparency. So for us, yes, we're a scale-up business that is burning cash each month, and we've shared, publicly with the staff that we're pivoting towards profitability. It's something that we've done before. We became profitable during COVID when we went through this, and so that's our task to achieve again. And then what we've done is, just in that effort of increasing transparency, talk to everyone about what their role in that will be, so that it's a shared problem. We all know how we're going to get through it together, and the more that we can make ourselves available and answer questions that are burning, I'd much rather people ask a question and that we as a senior leadership team address it with a really honest answer than have corridor conversations and working colleagues up into a frenzy of panic when it might not actually be something that's factual or true. So the more that you create a space for those questions to arise, and so that you can address them in a way that's appropriate, then the more you lean into the transparency, then the better that your teams will be able to navigate through this difficult period.
Lucy, we've seen some high-profile moments in the fintech space, so I could imagine that your team occasionally looks around at each other and wonders, how are you tackling this particular issue?
So we're not dissimilar to Anna. I suppose we do have a lot of avenues to talk to each other, be it through monthly wraps, stand-ups, etc. When I think about people and culture, or externally as well, we're definitely relying on talking to our peers in market. I know I'm, even speaking with Anna and Damien, what's working for you? Have you got any tips or tricks? I'm finding that's really helpful also.
Yeah, good advice there. And Damien, from HiBob's perspective, of course, you are talking to all of these companies and helping these startups along the way. What are you saying to them?
Yeah, look, I think actually to Lucy's point, there's a huge amount of collaboration going on between all the companies that we're working with, and we seem to be able to be a little bit of an inflection point for that to help trigger. We've got, an amazing kind of community base that we've already built here within, a very short period of time, and that learning and sharing is invaluable, I think, for the support systems for everyone that's going through this. And again, it varies depending on the circumstances of each of the businesses that we're talking to. So there's very big divides between what's happening, and it's not kind of an even keel for everybody. That's what's going on. So that's what's quite interesting about our role here, is we get to kind of understand what's going on from a lot of different perspectives and help to connect the dots with other businesses that are in one of the two buckets that that might be happening at the moment. So yeah, a broad range of opinions and a broad range of realities for a lot of different businesses out there.
All right, we do need to wrap, but I do have one very important question. It's quite controversial, so I do want to put it to all of you. Someone in your team has a birthday coming up. Do you ask everyone to put it in a spreadsheet and their birthday cake preferences, or is a surprise better? Damien, what should we do here? This is a big, big problem, I think, because the wrong cake can ruin a birthday.
And look, you know, COVID-19 wasn't just about being in the room. It's definitely affected my my cake intake. So I'm going to go for the surprise.
Well, Anna, my wife hates surprises, especially around her birthday. What would your advice be?
Well, to be honest, I would leave it to the team themselves to decide. And so if you want to, we've got some people here that are like, do not miss my birthday. It is important. And they will remind you that it's coming up. That person gets celebrated. Other people are more like your wife. So each to their own.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly don't mention the number of years. Lucy, of course, Zeller is a new company, but one of the things I love about what we do here at Pinstripe and Startup Daily is we celebrate the number of years, the work anniversaries, just as much as we do birthdays. Do you keep all of those down and celebrate those moments, or do you have a quiet word and sort of say to people, let us know, do you want to or prefer not to?
We definitely do. To Damien's point, we use Slack a lot to celebrate and shout out. And actually, for our employee anniversaries, we've gone one step further and we've actually recently invested in a Zeller forest. So for any anniversary, we'll plant a tree, which is just outside of Bendigo.
That sounds like a fantastic idea. I'm leaving right now to go and put that idea to our team, because I think planting trees is the perfect celebration. Damien, Lucy, Anna, thank you so much for your brilliant insights today and being so generous with them with all of our viewers today. That is all we have time for. So please thank Anna Wenngren, Damien Andreasen and Lucy Chisholm for their exceptional advice. A huge thank you to our sponsor HiBob for helping us with this webinar. I hope it's been incredibly useful for you, and certainly thank you so much for watching us. Don't forget to catch up with Startup Daily on AusBiz at 2 p.m. today. That's all for now.